He arrived by bus, holding his 6-year-old daughter's hand, a worn tool bag hanging from one shoulder. The name stitched across the chest of his Navy uniform read, Isaac Reed, Temporary Maintenance Technician. Inside the building ahead, dozens of engineers were preparing for the most important demonstration of the year, an $80 million contract hanging in the balance. No one looked at him as he walked through the gate. No one in that building knew that the fault quietly buried inside the system they were about to fail on was the exact same fault he had found and fixed 7 years ago. Stay with this story because the quietest person in the room is sometimes the one who sees the most clearly. The alarm on Isaac Reed's phone went off at 6:15, same as every morning. He silenced it before the second vibration, careful not to wake Luna in the next room. The apartment was small, a 2-bedroom in a quiet part of the city where the rent was manageable and the bus line ran early. He had chosen it for those 2 reasons, and no others. He made oatmeal while the kettle boiled, standing in the narrow kitchen in his uniform pants and a white undershirt, moving between the stove and the counter with the quiet efficiency of someone who had performed this routine so many times, it no longer required thought. He set Luna's bowl on the table, added a small spoon of honey, not too much, and placed her juice glass beside it. On his left wrist, the old watch sat where it always sat. The crystal was cracked in the lower left corner, a thin diagonal line that had been there for 14 months. The watch still kept perfect time. He had never considered replacing it. Luna came downstairs in her pajamas, hair tangled, Bolt tucked under one arm. Bolt was a small plastic robot, roughly the size of a hardcover book. Assembled from spare parts Isaac had collected when he was still working at Helion Dynamics. He had built it for her on a Sunday afternoon 2 winters ago, when they both needed something to do with their hands. She had named it herself. She carried it nearly everywhere. That morning, Bolt's left arm was hanging loose at the shoulder joint. Luna set the robot on the table beside her bowl and examined it with the expression of someone reviewing a patient before a difficult conversation. Bolt's arm broke. Isaac looked over from the stove. I'll fix it tonight. Luna accepted this and began eating. His phone buzzed. A message from the school. Unexpected closure due to a facility issue. All classes suspended for the day. He read it twice, then looked at Luna, who was feeding Bolt a theoretical spoonful of oatmeal using the back of her spoon. He called his maintenance supervisor, explained the situation plainly, asked if he could bring his daughter in for the day and keep her in non-restricted areas. There was a pause on the line long enough that Isaac quietly prepared a second option in his mind, and then, fine, but keep her out of the labs. He thanked the man and hung up. Before they left, he clasped the old watch around his wrist, the way he always did, without looking, without thinking. It had been Elena's. She had worn it through 2 jobs and 1 cross-country move, and she had pressed it into his hand the week before the accident, saying the clasp was loose, and she didn't want to lose it at work. He'd had the clasp repaired. He had never given it back. Luna finished her juice, picked up Bolt, and stood at the door with her small backpack. Ready, she said. Isaac picked up his tool bag. Let's go. Novatech Automation occupied a 4-story glass and steel building on the industrial side of the city, the kind of building designed to communicate capability before you walk through the door. The lobby had a polished stone floor, a reception desk lit from beneath, and a large display on the far wall showing a countdown in clean white text. Demo. 1400 hours Engineering Lab B. It was 7:45 in the morning, and the building was moving fast. Employees crossed the lobby with coffee cups and laptops, speaking in clipped sentences, making eye contact briefly and looking away. The energy was the particular kind that settles over a workplace on a day when something large is about to happen, not panic, but concentrated pressure, every small task carrying the weight of the one it was leading toward. Giselle Hart came down the stairs from the 2nd floor, with Cameron Walsh half a step behind her, his tablet held at an angle so she could see the screen as they walked. Giselle was 28 years old, with a precision about her that extended from the cut of her black blazer to the way she moved through a room, efficient, deliberate, never wasting a step. She had taken over Novatech from her father 3 years ago, under circumstances that had not been easy. It was getting easier. Cameron Walsh was 46 and had been the company's chief engineer for 5 of those years. He was competent, organized, and absolutely certain, at nearly all times, that he was the most technically capable person in any given room. This certainty had served him well enough that no one had yet given him a compelling reason to examine it. 2 o'clock demo, Cameron said. Wyatt Hale from Apex Industries arrives at 1:50. $80 million contract. I ran the system 3 times this morning, clean every time. We walk in. We show him the line running at full operating speed. He signs. Giselle reviewed the data on his screen. You're certain? I'm always certain. She handed the tablet back without comment and kept walking. At the front desk, Isaac arrived with Luna and explained the situation to the receptionist. School closure. No other options. She would stay in common areas only. The receptionist called upstairs, confirmed with the maintenance supervisor, and issued Isaac a gray temporary access card, the lowest tier in the building system. Adrian Cole was passing through the lobby when he noticed them, specifically when he noticed Bolt. Its left arm hanging at an angle that suggested serious structural compromise. Adrian was 31, a systems engineer 3 years into the role, the kind of person who noticed small things and usually kept those observations to himself unless they were directly relevant. He slowed slightly to look at the robot. He's been in the wars, Adrian said. Luna looked at him with the gravity of someone correcting a misdiagnosis. Dad's fixing it tonight. Adrian glanced at Isaac. Isaac gave a single nod. Adrian smiled and kept walking. Isaac collected his work order from his supervisor, 3rd floor. A relay showing a fault warning, log and replace, and headed for the elevator. To reach the stairwell, he had to walk the length of the 2nd floor hallway. Engineering Lab B was at the end of it. Its outer wall was floor-to-ceiling glass. The production line inside was already running a warm-up test. Isaac heard it before he registered what he was seeing. The hallway carried ordinary building sounds. Voices from offices, the distant elevator, ventilation. But underneath all of it, filtering through the thick glass of Lab B's wall, there was a sound from the production line that did not belong. He could not have easily explained how he recognized it. It was not loud. It was not obvious. It was a micro-variation in the motor rhythm at 1500 RPM, a flutter at a frequency that only registers if you have spent years learning to listen for it. He stopped. Luna stopped with him. She looked at the machinery behind the glass 6 robotic arms, a conveyor system, servo motors, a control panel lit with green indicators, and then looked up at her father. What are you looking at? That machine, he said quietly. Something's not right. The door to Lab B opened. Cameron Walsh stepped out, reviewing something on his tablet. He looked up and saw the man in the Navy maintenance uniform standing in front of the glass wall, a 6-year-old beside him, and he stopped. What are you doing here? Isaac Reed, temporary maintenance. 3rd floor. Isaac paused. I was walking past. I heard something in the motor feedback on the 3rd servo from the left. The encoder phase response sounds, "Who authorized you to stand here?" I'm on my way to. Cameron turned toward the security officer at the far end of the hallway. His movement was deliberate. Get him out of here. Then, a glance at Luna. The child, too. Inside the lab, 3 engineers were at their stations. 2 of them looked up at Cameron's voice. One of them looked at Isaac at the gray access card, the worn tool bag, the little girl holding a robot with a broken arm, and looked back at his screen without a word. Giselle Hart came down the hallway from the elevator at that moment, already reading something on her phone. She registered the scene in a single glance. Maintenance uniform, small child. Cameron Walsh standing with his arms beginning to cross. The security officer approaching. She understood exactly what was happening. She looked at Isaac for approximately 2 seconds. Then she walked into the conference room to prepare for the Wyatt Hale briefing. Isaac did not argue. He nodded at the security officer brief, neutral, and turned and walked back down the hallway with Luna's hand in his. Her grip was slightly tighter than usual, but she matched his pace without being asked. She looked back once. Over her shoulder. "That man doesn't like you?" "He's busy," Isaac said. They rounded the corner. From behind the glass, the warm-up test continued. Motor hum, conveyor movement, the faint and unmistakable off-rhythm flutter at the frequency Isaac had stopped for. He did not look at the watch on his wrist. He sometimes did that in moments of pressure, the way some people reach for a particular memory when they need steadying. He didn't this time. He just walked. Luna adjusted Bolt under her arm and kept pace beside him. Wyatt Hale arrived at 1:58, exactly 2 minutes before the scheduled time, which was consistent with every meeting he had attended in the past decade. He was 55 years old, wore a gray suit that had been expensive when it was new and had aged well, and carried a single leather briefcase. He had no assistant with him. He did not need one. Wyatt had spent 30 years in industrial manufacturing, the last 15 as lead procurement officer for Apex Industries. In that time, he had evaluated and purchased automated production systems for 12 facilities across 4 continents. He had been misled by optimistic engineers and genuinely impressed by extraordinary work and everything in between. He had learned, gradually, to say very little during a demonstration and to let the machine tell him what the people in the room could not bring themselves to admit. Giselle met him in the lobby and walked him to Lab B. They made small, accurate conversation. Neither wasted the other's time. The demonstration room was wide and clean. On one side, a control panel with a large display showing real-time system metrics. On the other side, behind a glass partition, the production line's 6 robotic axes, 4 conveyor segments, a sorting array, all of it connected through the automated servo control system Novatech had spent 14 months developing. Cameron stood at the main control station. He walked Wyatt through the specifications in 5 minutes, fewer words than he might have used with someone less experienced, which was the right call. Wyatt listened without interrupting. "We'll begin at standard low-speed calibration," Cameron said, "then escalate to full operating speed. 2200 RPM, sustained the rate your Michigan facility will require for the morning production cycle." Wyatt nodded. The system came up. 500 RPM fluid, steady. 1000 clean. 1500, exactly as it should be. Wyatt leaned slightly forward. Cameron let the silence work for him. "Full operating speed," Cameron said, and increased the output. 1800, 1900, 2000. At 2050 RPM, a sound entered the room. Not loud, not alarming on first hearing, but wrong. A vibration layered under the motor hum, like a note played just slightly off-key in an otherwise clean chord. 2100 RPM. The status display went yellow, then red. Emergency stop. The entire line shut down. The robotic arms froze mid-sequence. The conveyors stopped. The display filled with a single large red status block, and in the silence that followed, the only sound in the room was the ventilation system running overhead. Wyatt looked at the frozen display. Then he looked at his watch. He did not speak. Giselle said, "Cameron." The color had left Cameron's face, though his expression had not changed. "A minor fault in the startup sequence. We'll isolate it immediately." Wyatt placed his briefcase on the nearest chair. "I'll have coffee," he said. 60 minutes. If the system isn't running, I'll reschedule for next quarter." A pause. "If you'd still like to." Those last 4 words were the most expensive thing said in the room all day. Giselle walked Wyatt to the adjacent conference room, made sure he had everything he needed, and returned to the hallway in under 3 minutes. She stood at the window of Lab B. Inside, Cameron had assembled his engineering team around the main workstation. There were 5 of them, Adrian Cole, 2 senior systems engineers, a firmware specialist named Marcus, and a hardware technician named Lily. Cameron stood at the center with the authority of someone who had not yet admitted, even privately, that he might not have the answer. Adrian firmware, interrupt handler, and communication stack. Marcus environmental sensors, thermal variance, pressure. Lily servo wiring and connector integrity, 3rd and 5th axes. Jason. Eric PLC. Communication logs. Timing anomalies. The engineers moved. Keyboards, diagnostics panels, cable checks. 15 minutes later, each of them reported back. Firmware. No errors. Communication stack. Nominal. Environmental sensors. Within standard range. Wiring. Intact. PLC logs. No anomalies in the past 48 hours. Cameron stared at the display. Run the test again. The system restarted. It climbed through the RPM range 500, 1000, 1500, 2000, 2100, and stopped. The same red status block, the same frozen arms, the same fault. 25 minutes in, Cameron narrowed the diagnostic focus to the encoder feedback loop on the 3rd axis. The engineers ran it. Nothing. He broadened the search. Pulling 2 weeks of test logs, Adrian went through them line by line and found nothing that should have produced this result. There has to be something in the firmware, Cameron said, more to himself than the room. I've been through it twice, Adrian said carefully. Cameron's jaw tightened. Go through it again. Giselle came back to the lab door at the 30-minute mark. Cameron met her at the threshold. We're narrowing the scope, he said. 20 more minutes. You have 13, she said, not harshly, not with anger. The way someone states the time. She stood in the doorway a moment after Cameron returned to his station. She was running options whether to delay the meeting, offer a revised timeline, demonstrate an alternative system. None of them were good. She needed this machine to run. She looked out through the glass wall, down the long hallway. Isaac Reed was sitting on the bench near the elevator, the same bench he had occupied since being walked away from this door 2 hours earlier. Luna sat beside him, cross-legged, drawing on a piece of pink paper with a green crayon. Isaac sat straight, feet on the floor, hands resting loose on his knees. His eyes were oriented toward the lab, not at the window, not at anyone in particular, but toward the sound that was leaking through the wall. He looked like someone parsing a language in a language no one else in the building spoke. Giselle studied him for 3 seconds. Then she went back inside. Isaac had not gone to the 3rd floor. He had sat down on the bench when the security officer walked him back from the lab, and he had not moved. He could not have explained this to anyone in the building in a way they would have accepted. He had a relay waiting, a work order, a scheduled task. Instead, he was on a hallway bench while his daughter drew beside him. But there was something in the sound coming through the wall of Lab B, a frequency, a pattern of failure that had settled into a specific location in his memory and would not release. Luna finished one drawing and started another. Dad, why aren't you doing your job? I'm thinking, he said. She accepted this and drew ears on a horse. Every few minutes, the sound from inside the lab followed the same arc, the system spinning up, the climb through RPM, the wrong note at the same threshold, the shutdown. Isaac counted 4 cycles, each one dying within the same 50 RPM band, every single time. He had spent 7 years at Helion Dynamics. In his 4th year, during a production system installation for a facility in Michigan, he had tracked a fault for 3 days that turned out to be a calibration problem in an encoder feedback loop. The DHX7 encoder series carried a phase lag that appeared at high rotational speed. Static calibration showed nothing unusual. But under dynamic load, above a specific RPM threshold, a thermal and mechanical phase shift created a small offset in the feedback signal, small enough to be invisible in a routine check, large enough to produce a resonance condition in the closed-loop control system. The resonance frequency depended on the offset magnitude. The offset depended on ambient temperature. At 24 degrees Celsius, which was what the thermostat outside Lab B had read when he walked past it that morning, the resonance band fell somewhere between 2080 and 2120 RPM. He had just heard this system die 4 times, each time at approximately 2100. Isaac looked at Luna's drawing pad beside her. "Can I borrow a sheet?" She tore one out and handed it to him along with a short pencil, slightly chewed at the eraser end. He began to draw. Not a sketch, a technical diagram. Encoder feedback loop. Phase compensation block. RPM axis. Resonance band annotation. Ambient temperature variable. The kind of drawing that lives in the hands of someone who has made it many times before, that comes out fast and accurate, without apparent effort. In the lower corner of the pink sheet, barely visible beneath his work, was a small printed rabbit. Adrian Cole came out of Lab B to fill his water bottle at the fountain near the elevator. He nearly walked past Isaac entirely. Then he stopped and looked at the paper. He stood for a moment, then crouched slightly to read it more clearly. "What is that?" "A problem," Isaac said, without looking up. "My eye." Isaac handed it to him. Adrian held the sheet and read it slowly, then read it again. His expression moved through several stages. Uncertainty. Recognition. The specific discomfort of understanding something you have not wanted to understand. "You're saying the phase offset in the encoder calibration." "I'm not saying it. I know it." Isaac looked up for the first time. The resonance band for this motor configuration at that offset, at this temperature, is 2080 to 2120 RPM. It's dying exactly there. Every single time. Adrian looked at the pink paper. He looked at Isaac. He looked at the Navy maintenance uniform. He looked at the paper again. He turned and went back inside. Cameron was at the main workstation when Adrian approached. The room had gone quieter. The kind of quiet that descends when skilled people have exhausted their most likely explanations and are beginning to consider the less likely ones. "Cameron." Adrian kept his voice even. "There's someone in the hallway who might know what the problem is." Cameron did not look up from his screen. "Who?" "Isaac Reed. The maintenance technician." He drew a diagram. "He's not allowed in here." Cameron said this before Adrian finished the sentence, with the finality of a man who has made a decision and does not intend to revisit it. "We have a full engineering team. I don't need a maintenance worker making guesses during a critical window." "He's not guessing." Adrian placed the pink sheet on the workstation beside Cameron's keyboard. "He says it's a phase offset in the DHX7 encoder calibration. Resonance band at this room temperature is exactly where we're crashing. Every time." Cameron looked down at the paper. He saw the diagram, clean lines, precise notation, a technical literacy that did not belong on a child's drawing sheet with a rabbit printed in the corner. He pushed it to the side. "That's a first-year calibration theory. We checked calibration." "Static calibration," Adrian said. "At 500 RPM, the room was very quiet." One of the engineers at the far station had stopped typing. "I run this lab," Cameron said. "I determine what gets checked and when. The fault is in the software stack, and we are going to find it." Giselle had come back into the lab while Adrian was speaking. She had heard enough of it. She picked up the pink sheet from where Cameron had pushed it and held it. She read the diagram carefully, the encoder feedback notation, the DHX7 annotation, the resonance band numbers with their temperature variable. She turned it over once, a pink page from a child's drawing pad, a small rabbit printed in the corner, now covered in pencil handwriting from someone who understood precisely what they were looking at. "Adrian," she said. "Say it again." Adrian repeated it, briefly. "Cameron." "Giselle, this is not Cameron." She looked at him directly. "The last dynamic calibration check. When was it performed?" A pause. "Not long. Long enough. Last Tuesday," he said. 9:43 a.m. At what RPM? The room waited. It had the specific quality of a room where everyone already knows the answer to the question being asked, and is waiting for the one person responsible to say it out loud. 500, Cameron said. Static test. Giselle held his gaze for one moment. Then she looked at the door. Bring him in, she said. 7 minutes. Giselle. He's 7 minutes, Cameron. She placed the pink sheet on the edge of the workstation, said it quietly, and that was the end of the conversation. Cameron looked at her, and then at the paper, and then somewhere else entirely. Adrian was already moving toward the door. In the hallway, Isaac was in the same position he had held for the better part of 2 hours, straight-backed, unhurried. Luna was beside him, working on a new drawing. She had moved on from horses to trees. Adrian stopped in front of them. The CEO would like you to come in. She has 7 minutes. Isaac looked at him. Then through the glass at the frozen production line. Then at Luna. Luna looked up from her paper. Go, Dad. I'll keep drawing. Isaac stood, picked up his tool bag, and followed Adrian inside. The room registered him when he walked in. It would have been impossible for it not to a man in a Navy maintenance uniform, carrying a worn tool bag, walking into the most pressurized room in the building. Several engineers looked up. One of them looked immediately back at his screen. Isaac did not look around. He walked to the main control station, placed his bag on the work surface, and looked at the display. Show me the encoder calibration log for servo axis 3. Most recent entry. The nearest engineer looked at Cameron. Cameron gave a single nod. Slow. Flat. The engineer pulled the log. Isaac leaned in and read it. 30 seconds. Giselle watched him read and noted the way he moved through the data. No hesitation, no performance of looking, just reading. He straightened up. Last calibration. Tuesday, 9:40. 3 a.m. Static test. 500 RPM. He looked at Cameron without expression. No dynamic calibration at operating speed. Dynamic calibration for this system is necessary. The DHX7 encoder series has a documented phase lag at high rotational velocity. It produces a feedback offset between 0.15 and 0.4 degrees depending on ambient temperature. He glanced at the thermostat on the wall behind the secondary workstation. Current room temperature, 24 degrees Celsius. Offset at that temperature is approximately 0.28 to 0.32 degrees. Resonance frequency for this motor configuration at that offset, 2080 to 2120 RPM. No one spoke. The young engineer at the far end of the workstation had opened a calculation window on his secondary screen. He was running the numbers quietly. He looked at the result. He looked at Isaac. He looked at the result again. Cameron, you don't have access to this system. Giselle, he does. I'm authorizing it. Isaac sat down at the control interface. He opened the firmware configuration panel, navigated to the encoder settings 3 keystrokes. No search time. The way someone moves through a system they have built themselves, and brought up the offset compensation field. Current value, 0.0. 0 degrees. Unset. The field had never been touched. He typed 0.30. Pressed enter. Restart the servo controller on axes 3 and 5. The engineer at the restart panel looked at Giselle. She nodded. The restart sequence ran. 10 seconds. 20. The system indicators cycled through their startup states. Amber, amber, green. Run the test sequence, Isaac said. Take it to 2200. Cameron stood with his arms at his sides. He said nothing. The system came up. 500 RPM, clean. 1000, 1500. The conveyor began moving again, the robotic arms resuming their interrupted sequence, the display filling with returning metrics. 2000, 2050, 2100. No vibration. No flutter. No red. 2200 RPM, sustained. The display held green across every metric. The robotic arms cycled through their sequence once, twice, a third time, without interruption. The numbers did not waver. The machine ran. No one moved for a moment. The room was very quiet. Not the heavy quiet of before, but a different kind. The quiet that comes after a thing has been resolved, and no one has yet decided how to speak about it. Luna's face appeared at the glass partition in the hallway. She had pressed close to Cian, her small hands cupped around her eyes. She saw her father at the workstation, the green display, the running line. She waved once. On the edge of the control station, apart from the keyboards and cables, the pink sheet sat where Giselle had set it. The pencil diagram, the resonance band, circled in a small, precise loop, the rabbit in the corner. Giselle left the lab without speaking. She walked to the conference room at a pace that was composed without being rushed, and knocked once before entering. Wyatt Hale was on his second cup of coffee. He had been looking out the window. He showed neither relief nor impatience when she came in, consistent with a man who had learned not to show either until the information warranted it. "It's been resolved," Giselle said. Wyatt set down his cup. "Show me." They returned together. Cameron reset the sequence. The system ran from 0500, 1000, 1500, 2000, 2200, sustained. 8 full minutes. Clean across every metric. The robotic arms cycled through the production sequence without interruption. The numbers did not move from their target ranges. Wyatt watched all 8 minutes. He asked 2 questions. One about maintenance intervals at sustained high speed. One about the thermal tolerance of the encoder housing. Cameron answered them. Wyatt nodded. He opened his briefcase and took out the contract folder. $80 million. 2 signatures. A date. Both parties shook hands. Before Wyatt left, he paused at the doorway and looked back through the glass partition into the hallway beyond. Isaac was in the corner, crouched beside Luna, who had returned to her bench with her drawing pad. Wyatt watched them for a moment, the man in the maintenance uniform, the child with the robot. "Who fixed it?" he asked. Giselle considered the question for one brief moment. "Our technician," she said. Wyatt nodded slowly. "Keep him." He walked to the elevator, shook Giselle's hand once more, and left. Giselle stood in the empty doorway after the elevator closed. The contract folder was in her hand. The building around her was settling back into its ordinary rhythm: voices, keyboards, the ventilation system. In the lab behind her, Cameron Walsh picked up his tablet from the workstation. He did not speak to anyone in the room. He walked to the door, turned into the hallway, and moved toward the far elevator, the one at the opposite end from where Isaac and Luna were sitting. He did not look in their direction. Giselle watched him go until he turned the corner. She looked at Adrian. He had his phone already out. "The calibration warning emails," she said. "Full chain. Send them now." Adrian was already typing. Through the glass partition, she could see Isaac in the hallway. He had put his tool bag on the floor and taken a small piece of copper wire from the side pocket. Luna was holding Bolt out toward him, the broken left arm extended. Isaac was working carefully, threading the wire through the shoulder joint with the steady precision of someone accustomed to working at small scale. Luna was watching with complete attention, the same expression she might wear watching anything that required skill. Giselle looked at them for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then she straightened, tucked the contract folder under her arm, and went to find him. Adrian caught up to Isaac in the hallway before Giselle arrived. He sat down on the bench beside him, while Luna counted on her fingers. She was explaining arithmetic to Bolt, patiently, with considerable pedagogical commitment. "There's something you should know," Adrian said, keeping his voice low. The dynamic calibration was on the pre-demo checklist. Cameron signed off on removing it. said there wasn't time before the deadline, and that static calibration was sufficient. He paused. I sent him 2 emails in the past 2 weeks, saying it wasn't. He replied to the first one. Exact words. Not necessary for this application. Isaac was threading the copper wire into Bolt's shoulder joint with a small pair of needle-nose pliers from his tool bag. His pace did not change. You kept them? He said. Everything. Full threads, timestamps. Isaac nodded. He finished the wire, tested the joint with a small rotation, found it solid. He handed Bolt back to Luna, who inspected the repair immediately with the focused skepticism of a quality control inspector. It's a little crooked, she said. It'll hold, Isaac said. Giselle appeared at the end of the hallway. She walked toward them without a particular expression on her face. Not the performance of composure. Not visible strain. She had always been better at composure than she was comfortable admitting, and this was one of those moments where it mattered. She stopped in front of Isaac. He stood. Isaac, she said. He looked at her and waited. This morning, she said. I was in this hallway. I saw what happened. I watched Cameron have you removed. She paused. I didn't say anything. This was not an apology wrapped in context or delivered through the softening language of circumstance. She said it clearly, without defense, and let it stand on its own. Isaac looked at her steadily. He did not offer her the relief of a gracious response. He didn't need to make it harder either. There was nothing hostile in his silence, only the direct attention of someone receiving what was actually being said. Luna looked up from Bolt. Dad, the arm works, she announced, and held the robot up with both hands. Giselle looked down at Bolt. The slightly angled arm, the 6-year-old holding it up like an object of significance. She looked back at Isaac. I told her it would hold, he said. Something in Giselle's expression shifted. Not quite a smile. Close. She looked at Adrian. Forward them now. He was already typing. Then she looked at Isaac. Are you still here for a while? I never finished the relay on 3, he said. When you're done, she said, come find me. She held his gaze one more moment. I'd like to talk. She walked back down the hallway. Isaac watched her go. Then he picked up his tool bag, adjusted the strap, and looked at Luna. Come on. We're going upstairs. By 5 in the afternoon, the building had thinned. The demonstration day pressure had dispersed into the ordinary quietness of closing time chairs being pushed back, monitors going dark, the calm that settles over a space that has been under tension for hours and is finally releasing it. Isaac and Luna were in the break room on the 2nd floor. He had set out their dinner on the small table by the window, a tin lunchbox, 2 compartments, rice and a fried egg, and 2 slices of tomato. He had made it that morning without knowing they would be eating it here. That hadn't changed how he'd packed it. Luna was working through her portion with systematic focus, pausing occasionally to explain to Bolt, propped against the sugar bowl, what each item was and why it was worth eating. Giselle knocked once and came in. She looked around the break room, the way people sometimes look at spaces they use every day without seeing the water stain on the ceiling tile, the coffee maker with the cracked handle, the parking structure visible through the window in the early dark. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from Isaac, without asking. Luna looked at her. You're the hallway lady. Gisela said. Luna considered this, nodded once, and returned to her rice. Giselle looked at Isaac. Where did you work before here? Helion Dynamics. 7 years. Senior systems engineer. She already knew this. She had pulled his file the moment she was back at her desk. She asked, because she wanted to hear him say it. Why are you here instead? Flexible hours, he said. And I need to be close to her. Giselle's gaze dropped to the watch on his wrist. The cracked crystal, the second hand moving precisely around the face, keeping perfect time through the damage. She did not ask about it. She placed a white envelope on the table between them. Lead systems engineer. Full-time. Compensation. To match your Helion rate. We'll discuss the specific figure. Schedule is between you and me. I don't believe in fixed hours for people who deliver results. Isaac picked up the envelope, opened it. Read it with the same attention he had given the calibration log that afternoon, carefully, without rushing, taking what the document required. He set it down. He did not say yes and did not say no. Luna looked up. "Dad, what do they want you to do?" "Fix machines," he said. "But this time they know I'm doing it." Giselle looked at him across the small table, the navy uniform, the tin lunchbox, the old watch with the cracked face, the daughter methodically describing a slice of tomato to a plastic robot with a slightly crooked arm. She had been in rooms with a great number of capable people over the past 3 years. She had learned, slowly, that capability announced itself quietly in the people who had nothing to prove. "Take tonight," she said. "Come back tomorrow if you want to talk terms. I'll read it carefully." Of course. She rose to leave. At the door she stopped. Through the window at the end of the hallway, the evening sky had deepened to a steady violet, and in it, faint but clear, precisely positioned, a thin crescent moon had appeared. Luna saw at the same moment. She pointed. "Look, Dad." Isaac looked. He did not say anything. He rested 2 fingers against the face of the old watch, the cracked crystal, the moving hands, the clasp he had fixed and kept, and held them there for a moment. Giselle watched from the doorway. Then she turned and walked back to her office. She had one more thing to do before she left the building. She sat at her desk, opened the email chain Adrian had sent, and read through every one of Cameron Walsh's replies with full attention. Then she picked up the phone and called the board chair. The conversation was not long. She said what needed to be said, supported by what she had in writing, and did not apologize for the content or the hour. When she hung up, the building was quiet. Through her office window, the crescent moon sat small and steady in the dark sky above the parking lot. Some days end with a signature, some with a silence that means more than the signature did. This one was both.